When Linda Carroway drove up the narrow gravel road to the old scout camp that June morning, she never imagined it would be the last time she saw her daughter's face. Troop 935 was supposed to spend the weekend learning to tie knots and toast marshmallows. Instead, they simply vanished, 12 girls and 2 leaders, swallowed by the California hills as if they had never been there at all. For 30 years, the truth lay hidden underground, behind a door no one thought to look for. The campground was called Penny Ridge, though there were hardly any pines left by 1962. A dry lightning storm had burned most of the trees to black skeletons a decade before. Still, the Girl Scouts returned every summer because the land was cheap and the cabins, patched together from scavenged lumber, could hold a whole troop with room to spare. That Friday afternoon, the girls had arrived in a single blue school bus, their excited voices carrying across the clearing as they unloaded canvas bedrolls and cardboard boxes of supplies. Neighbors who lived along the road later said they could hear singing drifting down the valley even after dusk. It was the last normal sound anyone would associate with Penny Ridge. By Saturday morning, when the troop was supposed to check in by radio, nothing came through but static. The regional council assumed it was a bad battery or a careless troop leader who forgot to report. When the bus didn't return Sunday night, calls were made to local sheriffs. A deputy finally drove up the mountain before dawn on Monday. He found the campsite almost untouched. 12 bedrolls arranged in 2 neat rows, half-eaten food still on the picnic tables, and a fire burned down to cold ash. The girls' backpacks were stacked beneath a tarp near the latrine. There was no blood, no sign of struggle, only a set of tracks in the brittle dirt leading toward a rocky slope that overlooked the dry creek bed. The prints ended in a tangle of brush, as if they'd simply stopped walking. Word spread faster than the deputies could control it. Within hours, reporters had crowded the gravel road with their vans and cameras, and the mothers and fathers of Troop 935 huddled beside them, clutching photographs and whispering prayers. The search stretched on for days, rescuers combing gullies, climbing ridges, and rappelling into abandoned mine shafts. They found nothing. Linda Carroway, who had driven her daughter Sally up the mountain, returned every week that summer. She left small bundles of peanut butter crackers and handwritten notes weighted with stones. Once, she thought she heard giggling in the dusk, a bright, fleeting sound that was gone as soon as she turned her head. For years, Penny Ridge sat undisturbed. The cabins decayed in the sun, roofs sagging under winter storms. Locals said the ground up there felt wrong, that the wind seemed to change direction without warning. Most people stopped coming. By the 1980s, the troop's disappearance had become part of Grenada's folklore, a cautionary tale told to children who wandered too far after dark. Some believed the girls had been taken by a drifter. Others insisted they'd stumbled onto something they weren't meant to see, some secret hidden in the hills since the war. No theory could be proven. No evidence ever surfaced. Just a collection of small artifacts. A girl's shoe wedged in a crevice near the creek, a broken plastic whistle found by hikers in 1971. Each clue felt like a message in a language no one could decipher. And so the families learned to live inside the silence. Parents died without answers. Siblings grew up with questions that only deepened over time. Then, in the summer of 1992, a construction company was contracted to expand the old highway that twisted past Penny Ridge. Their bulldozers scraped away layers of scrub and stone, inching closer to the place where the tracks had ended. On a blistering July afternoon, one of the operators struck metal. At first, they thought it was an abandoned well cap. But as they cleared the soil, it became obvious this was something else, a rusting steel door set flush into the ground, bolted shut. The sheriff's department was called. Within hours, the clearing was cordoned off with yellow tape. Reporters returned, older, but no less hungry for a headline. And in the crowd of onlookers stood Linda Carroway, her hair gone white, her hands gripping a photograph of Sally in her crisp green uniform. As deputies forced the door open, a stale draft lifted into the summer air, a smell of mildew, decay, and something harder to define. Flashlights flickered over concrete walls and narrow bunks built into the earth. No one spoke for a long moment. What they found inside that bunker would unravel 30 years of theories and reveal a truth more terrible than any parent could bear to imagine. The first deputy to step inside the bunker was a man named Cole Madison. He'd been a rookie in 1962 when the troop disappeared, too new to be assigned to the search, but old enough to remember the way the town seemed to fall into a collective hush after it happened. Now, 30 years later, he crouched in the gloom with a handkerchief pressed to his mouth. The air was thick, stale as a tomb. Along the concrete walls, rusted hooks still held scraps of canvas and twine. A single metal table had been bolted to the floor. On it lay a small pile of objects arranged with unsettling care: a brass Girl Scout pin, a coil of green yarn, a cracked ceramic mug painted with daisies. It was only when they swung their flashlights to the far wall that they realized the chamber continued deeper underground. A narrow hallway sloped down at an angle, ending in a second door. Cole signaled to the others to stand back. The hinges were stiff with corrosion, but when the deputies forced them open, the darkness beyond seemed almost to swallow the light. Someone whispered a prayer. Inside the second chamber, the smell grew worse. The walls had been painted with murals, flowers, smiling suns, crooked rainbows. At first they seemed childish, but as the beams moved, they picked out details that made the deputies go still. Faces in the murals, dozens of small faces, each painted with careful attention to the eyes, which were always open. In the far corner, a ring of thin mattresses lay side by side, 12 in total. It was there they found the remains. They were not complete skeletons. Some parts had decayed beyond recognition, while others were mummified by the dry subterranean air. But there was no doubt who they were. On the mattress nearest the mural of the rainbow, a faded name tag was still safely pinned to the fabric: Sally Caraway. The deputies radioed for the coroner and the forensic team. For a while, no one spoke. Some men left the chamber and retched into the weeds above. News spread faster than anyone could contain it. By the time the remains were carried out under tarps, the road was crowded again. Reporters, neighbors, aging parents who had never stopped hoping. Linda Caraway stood behind the barricade, her eyes locked on the stretchers as they passed. She didn't cry. Her mouth moved as if reciting something she had practiced for decades. Later, a deputy would say she whispered her daughter's name over and over, but no one could hear for certain over the whir of cameras. Investigators began cataloging the evidence inside the bunker. Some of it was predictable: Girl Scout uniforms, tin plates, canteens. But there were stranger items, too. A set of oil lanterns with wicks burned nearly to nothing. A stack of notebooks, each filled with cramped handwriting that no one could immediately decipher. A tattered curtain hung across the entrance to a small alcove, behind which they found a locked metal cabinet. It was the cabinet that made the lead investigator, Special Agent Karen Thayer, pause longest. "Get this out in one piece," she told the evidence techs. "I don't want it cracked open down here." They hoisted it up the slope, past the murals and the circle of mattresses. In the afternoon sun, the steel looked almost black. The lock was heavy, handmade, a style Thayer had seen on military surplus. Back in Grenada, rumors had already begun to coalesce. Some said the troop had been held by a madman living under the hills. Others insisted the government had built the bunker decades before, though no records could be found. The coroner's preliminary report was quiet and grim. The girls had died in stages, some quickly, others over weeks. Malnutrition, dehydration, exposure. But there were no clear signs of violence, no obvious cause beyond the horror of being sealed away. One detail stood out. Each of the mattresses held a small ceramic mug identical to the one on the metal table. Inside each mug was a hardened residue of something once liquid. When the lab analyzed it, they discovered traces of a sedative, phenobarbital, in low doses. Whoever put the girls in that room had not wanted them to struggle or cry too loudly. And yet, no fingerprints, no tool marks, no footprints apart from the same small shoes. It was as if they had simply been led inside, lain down in their beds, and waited to disappear. The notebooks were sent to Sacramento for analysis, but it would be weeks before a single line was translated. We wait. We sing when the lights go out. We wait for the man to come back. There was no signature, no date, only the words etched in a cramped, childish hand, filling page after page. That night, when the last of the remains were taken to the morgue, Karen Thayer stood in the empty clearing. A single news van still idled below the road. She looked down at the hole where the door had been. The bunker felt like a mouth, black and patient. Somewhere in the darkness, she thought she heard a voice, thin, high, carrying the last line of a song. But when she turned, there was nothing, only the wind in the burned pines. At dawn, the town of Granada felt as if it were holding its breath. Word of the bunker and the bodies had spread across the county line, drawing crowds of strangers who stood at the barricades to watch the recovery teams come and go. Some people clutched old newspapers or faded, missing posters from 1962, hopeful that some final truth might still be waiting in the cold earth. Inside the sheriff's office, Special Agent Karen Thayer spread a tarp over the metal cabinet they had retrieved from the underground alcove. She circled it slowly, noting the corrosion around the hinges, the small dents in the steel that suggested it had been moved many times before it was abandoned. One of the deputies watched her with a grim expression. "You think there's more?" "Inside? I think," Thayer said quietly. "We're going to wish there wasn't." They brought in a locksmith from Sacramento. It took him nearly 2 hours to force the lock without breaking it. When the door finally swung open, the smell was faintly chemical preservative oil and something older beneath it. On the top shelf was a wooden box with a brass clasp. Beneath it lay a set of 6 glass jars, each wrapped in linen, sealed with yellowed wax. And below that, stacked in neat rows, were more notebooks, 30 in all. Each was bound in dark blue cloth, with a date hand-inked across the spine. The earliest read March 1961. The last was labeled October 1962. The same month, the troop vanished. Thayer reached for the topmost volume, pausing to pull on latex gloves. She felt the hush in the room deepen as she cracked the cover and began to read the first page. March 3rd. They come every Thursday. 12 of them. Sometimes I think about sealing the door before they leave, but they are too loud, too many to hold at once. I will wait until they are quieter. The handwriting was steady, deliberate. An adult's hand. The deputies traded glances. Thayer turned another page. March 10th. They trust me. I bring them biscuits and tea. They think 'tis a lesson. I have told them the rules. No singing when the lanterns go out. No touching the door. No crying in the night. If they follow the rules, I will keep them safe. She closed the book, her pulse in her throat. It was the first time the investigation had tangible proof that the girls had been alive, living, for some period after their disappearance. Not merely hidden away and left to die, but kept under watch. The forensic team took the cabinet into evidence. Each jar, each scrap of fabric, was cataloged and photographed, but no names were signed in any of the journals. The author referred to himself only once. "I am the one who keeps the quiet." In the days that followed, experts in archival ink and handwriting flew in from Los Angeles and Quantico. They confirmed the journals had been written sequentially over months, with no indication they were faked. But there were no fingerprints, no personal objects, no receipts or letters to place the keeper of the bunker in any known life above ground. The next significant clue came not from the journals, but from the wooden box hidden on the cabinet's top shelf. Inside, nested in cotton batting, were 12 more ceramic mugs. Each was identical to those recovered near the mattresses, hand-painted daisies, and a single initial etched on the bottom. The initials matched each of the girls. TH, SC, MA, and so on. But the 12th cup, marked with the letter K, did not correspond to any of the missing girls' names. Thayer stood staring at it long after the others had left the evidence room. In the harsh fluorescent light, the cup looked absurdly harmless. "Who were you?" she whispered. At the far end of Granada, in a white clapboard house overlooking the orchard, Linda Caraway sat at her kitchen table with her daughter's old Girl Scout handbook laid open before her. She traced the pledge with her fingertip, mouthing the words the troop had recited every Thursday before their hikes. "On my honor, I will try." When the phone rang, she did not answer. She did not move. Outside, the apple trees were in bloom. Petals drifted past the window like white ash. A week later, the coroner's team finished the preliminary examination of the remains. The final count was 12 partial skeletons, each lying precisely on their own thin mattress. 12. But as Thayer was driving back from the coroner's office, her pager went off. A deputy had been re-examining the photographs of the mural that lined the back wall of the chamber, the one painted with the rainbow and the circle of faces. There were 13 faces, 12 girls, each rendered in delicate detail, and one more, a smaller face near the corner, unfinished. Just the outline of eyes and a mouth, sketched in haste. They zoomed in on the photo. A faint scrawl ran along the edge of the rainbow, nearly invisible under the layers of chipped paint. Kay stayed behind to keep the quiet. Thayer sat back in her chair, the paper trembling in her hand. 13 faces, 12 bodies, and one small cup etched with a single letter. K. The first storm of autumn came early that year. By mid-October, heavy rain rolled across the Central Valley, soaking the orchards and cutting power to several rural properties around Granada. The media trucks were gone by then, replaced by low-slung government vans and quiet men in state-issued windbreakers who spoke in low tones and never gave their names. A makeshift canvas tent had been erected over the bunker entrance to shield the excavation from water damage. But what it couldn't stop was time. The bunker was collapsing. The deeper they went, the more they realized the chamber had been expanded gradually, tunnels widened by hand with spade and chisel. No professional construction, no records of permits, just raw will. Whoever had built it knew how to work in silence. By the fourth day of rain, investigators uncovered a second corridor, branching off from the main chamber. It sloped gently down, following the natural curve of the land, and ended at a steel door embedded into the clay wall. It was bolted from the inside. When they finally breached it, they found a second, much smaller room. No beds, no signs of a group, just one chair. It was a school-style desk chair, green-painted metal legs, fixed with rubber caps to muffle noise, bolted directly into the concrete. In front of it sat a narrow table, and upon it a hand mirror, small, cracked, and clean. Pinned to the wall was a single photograph. It showed 12 girls in their scout uniforms. They stood smiling near the creek, their sashes full of badges, their hands at their sides. One girl had a soft brace on her arm. Another had her socks mismatched, but each wore the same expression of squinting joy under the bright sun. They were identified easily, but in the mirror's corner, faint and barely visible, was a 13th shape, the reflection of a girl crouching just outside the camera frame, dark-haired, barefoot, watching. She wore no sash. Linda Caraway hadn't slept in 3 nights. She left the television on mute, flipping channels without seeing them. The discovery of the mirror room had been leaked. Someone at the sheriff's office had spoken to the press, and now every headline hinted at the impossible. 13th girl survived? She didn't believe it. She didn't want to. Her daughter, Marion, had been 11 in 1962, the youngest in the troop. Fragile in ways that were hard to explain, too eager to please, too hesitant to speak up. Linda could still hear her voice when she closed her eyes. A voice that paused mid-sentence, waiting for approval. A child who never finished her milk if no one asked her to. If anyone had survived that chamber, it wouldn't have been Marion. Agent Thayer flew to San Diego to interview Dolores Vines, the last living adult supervisor from the troop. In 1962, Vines had been only 23. She'd led the Thursday hikes and kept records of badge completions, but she hadn't been on the trip the day they vanished. "My mother was ill," Dolores explained, stirring her tea with a trembling hand. "I left the girls in the care of someone else, Thayer's pen paused over her notebook. Who? Dolores stared at her for a long time. The clock ticked. A storm clattered against the porch roof. Then, in a voice gone dry with guilt, she answered, Russell Pratt. He was my cousin. There was silence. He'd just come back from the Navy. Didn't have work. I asked him to chaperone the hike because I thought it might help him feel useful. He was good with the girls. Quiet. Patient. Her voice broke. I never forgave myself. Thayer's mouth was dry. Did you report this? His name isn't in any of the case files. Dolores shook her head. My father told me not to. He said we'd already lost the girls. No point losing the family too. The name Russell Pratt had not appeared in any investigation logs. Not once. But 5 days after the troop vanished, a man by that name had checked into a boarding house in Modesto using a false surname, Price. He stayed only 2 nights, then disappeared. No bank records, no tax filings, no military benefits collected. Vanished as if into the dirt. Back in Grenada, the forensic team found a third passage in the bunker. It had been filled in, shovel-packed earth and rock, sealed deliberately, as if someone had erased a trail behind them. A team began slow excavation, inch by inch. They found a rusted food can from 1963, a button from a scout sash, a girl's shoe size 4, its leather rotted, and eventually a narrow air shaft, lined with hand-carved slats. It exited a half-mile uphill through a vent covered in moss and pine needles. From above, it looked like a patch of wild brush. At the mouth of that shaft, hidden beneath leaves, they found a girl's comb. Dark strands of hair still tangled in its teeth. DNA testing confirmed it did not belong to any of the 12 girls identified in the bunker. The newspapers called her the Ghost Scout. TV panels argued whether she was real, whether she might still be alive. Was she the accomplice? The victim? The witness? No one could answer. But in the last notebook, October 1962, the final 2 entries changed everything. October 10th. Kay asks too many questions. She wants to open the door. She does not like the quiet. October 13th. The others are gone. I did not choose this. I only kept them safe. Kay will not stop scratching at the walls. I told her once, if you break the quiet breaks you. But she smiles now. She smiles like she knows something I don't. I will leave tomorrow. The notebook ends there. A scrawl on the back cover, smeared by water. She knows the tunnels better than I do. It took them 12 days to clear the tunnel. The clay was dense, laced with root systems and old shale, and the deeper the team went, the more unnatural the structure began to feel. Tunnels didn't hold shape like this unless someone maintained them. Someone careful. Someone with patience and reason. And obsession. The air grew colder as they dug. There were no signs of collapse, only deliberate construction. Support beams spaced by hand-measured intervals. Faint traces of chalk symbols on the inner walls. Not letters, not numbers, just marks. And every 20 or 30 feet, a small wooden niche cut into the side. Each held a single item. A girl sock, a seashell, a badge for sewing, a cloth napkin folded with a name stitched in red thread. Claire. Every object was dated in pencil on its underside. From 1962 up to 1974. They hadn't just vanished once. They had been kept. Dr. Sofia Larnaga had worked with the Behavioral Forensics Division in Quantico for nearly a decade. Her specialty was long-term confinement psychology, victims raised in isolation, captives from early childhood. When the Grenada case was reopened, she arrived on site within 36 hours of the notebook discovery. She read every page, then asked a single question. Why was Kate the only one named? Detective Norris didn't follow. Kay appears in the final entries, Larnaga said, holding up the stained pages. The author never uses her own name, but she refers to Kay multiple times, almost like she's writing to her. You think Kay's the one in the mirror? he asked. Loranaga closed the notebook slowly. I think Kay was the last one left. In early November, a woman from Carson City contacted the tip line. She'd seen the televised segment. She wanted to remain anonymous. My mother used to take me to a place in the mountains, she said. Around 1989, maybe 1990. I was 5 or 6. There was a woman who lived in a shack near the old trailhead. She had long black hair and didn't speak much, but she gave me a badge once. The operator asked what kind of badge. A Girl Scout badge, the woman said, but not new, old. It smelled like oil. The woman hadn't thought much of it until the broadcast, until they showed the mirror photo. She remembered the woman crouching just outside her line of vision, watching her with wide, still eyes. She didn't seem dangerous, she said. Just unfinished. Search teams combed that ridge for days, but the shack had long since collapsed. Wild animals had reclaimed the clearing. Still, they found the stone outline of a fire pit, and buried beside it, a rusted tin lunchbox. Inside, 2 more badges, a yellow plastic ring, and a photograph of 12 girls standing by a creek. This copy had been cut. The girl in the back, the crouching one, was gone, cleanly snipped from the print. By midwinter, forensic reconstruction of the bunker had yielded one more discovery. Buried beneath the second sleeping chamber was a cavity, an underground holding space accessed only through a hatch bolted from above. When they broke it open, the stench was immediate. The room was lined in tar paper. There were no windows, no furniture, only teeth. Hundreds of them. Children's teeth. Each placed inside a small jar and labeled in pencil. The handwriting matched the notebook. Some jars had names, others only dates. And on one, the oldest, marked July 1962, the note inside read, "My name is Marion. If someone finds this, tell my mother I tried to be brave." Detective Norris stood beside the forensic tech as she read it aloud. He did not speak, but he removed his badge and placed it in his jacket pocket. In Sacramento, the State Archive released a decades-old report, unreviewed, lost to misfiling. It had been submitted by a forestry intern in 1975, a description of an unlicensed structure encountered during a ridge survey outside Kings Canyon. The report included sketches, notes of wire mesh fencing, camouflage tarps, and a series of symbols carved into nearby trees. The intern had left a final comment. When I tried to get closer, someone whistled from the brush. I thought it was a warning. So I left. That intern was never interviewed. The structure was never investigated. A year after the tunnel's discovery, a state-sanctioned memorial was unveiled near the trailhead outside Granada. 12 stone markers stood in a circle, each carved with the names of the missing girls. But an unofficial 13th marker began appearing overnight. A local stonemason kept replacing it, carved only with the letter K. When asked why he kept doing it, he answered simply, "She's the one who stayed." But stayed where? In the darkroom of the sheriff's office, the original mirror photo was re-examined using updated scanning tech. Beneath the surface layer of exposure, a faint shadow became visible behind the crouched girl. Something like a figure. Unclear. Tall. Unmoving. Positioned at the tree line. None of the girls remembered a photographer, and no one ever came forward to claim the picture. That winter, someone sent an envelope to the Harrows Creek Police Department with no return address. Inside was a Girl Scout sash. Clean, pressed, modern. All 12 badges accounted for, except the final one, stitched in thread the color of ash, bore a different symbol. An open eye, crossed out. No message, no signature, only a post-it taped to the front. I learned to be quiet. Snow fell late that year, thin and early, the kind that came silent and left footprints long after the person was gone. Granada's trail system was closed to the public pending ongoing excavation, but locals still wandered near the outer ridge. Hikers left ribbons. Former troop leaders placed medals. A few surviving mothers, now well into their 70s, stood quietly near the memorial for hours without speaking. By then, the state had officially acknowledged 12 names, but not everyone agreed the list was complete. In the office of archivist Marnie Kepler, a stack of old troop applications lay on her desk. She wasn't a detective. She didn't chase leads. But something about the handwriting in the notebook had haunted her since the second night. It wasn't just the fear or the pleading. It was how careful it was, like someone who had to teach herself how to write. She pulled troop rosters from 1958 through 1963. Almost every girl listed had a corresponding parent's signature, except one. Initials only, WS. Girl's name, Kathleen. Age, 10. No birth certificate on file. And unlike the other girls, her application didn't list a home address, just a box number in Nevada. Marnie squinted at the application's faded corner. The paper wasn't typewritten like the others. It looked copied by hand. In a church basement 30 miles west of Harrows Creek, volunteers organized a donation drive for displaced families following the flood. Among the donated boxes, one woman, Carla J., age 61, came across a set of children's books. She opened the cover of the second one and froze. Inside, there was a name written in red crayon. Cat. Not unusual until she flipped to the next page. I didn't choose this name. I was given it. Please remember me. The handwriting was identical to the notebook. The book was immediately turned over to authorities. Inside the front cover was a sticker from a small lending library that had closed in 1992. In the library's ledger, faded but still legible, was one checkout entry for the book. Name? K. Sutter. No return recorded. 3 months later, in a town just across the Nevada line, a former nurse's aide came forward. Her daughter had shown her a photo on the local news. The bunkers, the badges. Something had stirred. I worked nights at St. Mary's in the early 90s, she said. We had a patient come in. Mid-30s. No ID, no history. She'd been found wandering outside a rest stop near the state line. She didn't speak, but she carried a pillowcase full of smooth stones. The nurse remembered the woman had long black hair. She was clean but distant, almost animal in how she moved. She only ever said one word. The nurse whispered. She said, "Scout." The woman disappeared from the facility after 3 days. No one ever found out how. A nurse was fired, but no missing persons report was filed. The incident was buried. Sophia Loranaga revisited the photo. The mirror photo. It had been digitally enhanced again, this time using forensic layering techniques that highlighted degradation zones, places where something had once existed but had since been removed. The girl crouched in the corner, the one presumed to be Kay, was not alone in the reflection. Behind her was a second face. Bigger, blurred, eyes open, but unfocused. Not a child, and not fully human. The analyst couldn't identify features, only the shape. Something wrong with the mouth. Something pulled too tight at the jawline. There had been rumors, Loranaga remembered, back in the 60s, about people who'd gone off-grid in the Sierra wilds. Survivalists, anti-government types. But this wasn't just paranoia. There had been a purpose to the tunnels. They were built for watching, not escaping. Late one night, someone broke into the memorial site and left something behind. A matchbox. Inside, a tooth. On the matchbox lid, written in marker. 12, not 13. You counted wrong. But the lab confirmed it wasn't a girl's. It was adult. Female. Estimated age. 35 to 40. Worn down like someone who had lived without proper food for years. And under the root of the molar was a tiny etching. A number. 042. The same number from the last page of the notebook. Entry 042. Kay wouldn't stop scratching the wall. She thinks there's something behind it. She thinks the mirror is lying. She's wrong. The mirror is the only thing that tells the truth. Loranaga sat alone with the notebook again. Entry 042 wasn't dated. It was the final page. But she noticed something in the margin that hadn't been visible before. In the right light, there was a fingerprint in oil, small, shallow. Not a child's. She ordered it scanned. It didn't match any of the missing girls. But it did match an unsolved case from 1991, an unidentified woman who'd been found living inside a culvert pipe near Carson City. Mute, sunburnt, malnourished. She vanished from custody 2 days after being placed in a temporary facility. The file named her only as Jane Doe 17, but in the corner of the intake form, someone had scribbled a question in pencil. Why does she keep asking for the mirror? By mid-February, the snow began to melt in the upper trails of the Granada Hills. What remained of the bunker complex had been mapped and partially stabilized. Portions were sealed off. Others, opened under court order, revealed entire corridors once thought to be collapsed. But the strangest thing wasn't what was found. It was the geometry. The tunnels weren't practical. They didn't follow bedrock or airflow logic. They looped in angles that strained belief, sometimes doubling back within inches of each other, but with no sound transfer. Some walls appeared only recently disturbed, shoveled or chipped, though no one had been down there for decades. Inside one dead-end corridor, behind a panel of rotted plywood, an investigator found an iron rod. Attached by twine was a string of 12 hand-carved wooden tokens. Each was etched with a number, and one of them, number 7, was broken in half. Loranaga stared at it for a long time. On one half was carved a date, 1962. On the other, 1992. 30 years. One floor up, forensic technician Rima Dev worked late reviewing contents of the 5th recovered chest, what they'd come to call the teaching box. It was filled with educational materials. Handmade worksheets, simple math problems, religious verses, an anatomical diagram drawn in pencil with incorrect proportions and no labeling. But inside the folder was something odd. An index card taped to a scrap of cloth. The card read, Test 3 obedience sound, and below that, in faint graphite, when the bell rings, don't look up. Back in Harrows Creek, a woman named Margaret Holloway, sister of one of the missing troop leaders, came forward with an audio tape from 1983. I was cleaning out our father's things, she told the press. He used to record his ham radio signals. He thought he was picking up dispatch traffic from another town. On the tape, a scratchy voice could be heard. Faint, but urgent. Troop 9. This is Bluebird Nest. Respond. Nest to 9. Troop 9. Respond. Location unsustainable. Repeat. Location breached. Request new instructions. It looped several times. The date of the recording? June 11th. Exactly 30 years to the day since the troop vanished. It was a boy from the neighboring county, 16 years old, who found the last clue. He'd been magnet fishing near the riverbed where the original search dogs had stopped in 1962. It was something his grandfather did, he said, to find old war scrap. Instead, he dragged out a rusted tin case barely the size of a lunchbox. It was sealed, but not locked. Inside were 6 worn patches, 4 disintegrated film negatives, and a Polaroid. The photo was overexposed, warped from age, but the figure in the center was unmistakable. Girl, maybe 12, hair tied back with string, wearing a sash, though the badges were drawn on, not sewn. She stood in what appeared to be a wooden hallway, but behind her was a door. And on that door, a mirror. Taped to the mirror was a torn page, written in red marker. You're not supposed to see this. Later that night, Dev went back through the recovered teaching box again. She had a feeling about the cloth square, the one labeled Test 3. The fabric was too thick for clothing. It wasn't cotton. It had tiny holes along the edge like something torn from upholstery. Under blacklight, she saw something else. Tiny dots across the surface. Braille. She had it translated. It read, I know I'm not supposed to write this, but if someone finds it, please tell me what month it is. I need to know how long I've been 12. Not long after, an aging park ranger named Elias Clark requested a meeting with Loranaga. He was retired, near 80, walked with a cane. Quiet man. I worked cleanup during the 1983 flood, he said. Nobody knows this, but we came across a strange patch of ground off Trail 6. Trees were stripped like a fire'd gone through, but no signs of actual burn. No wildlife either. Just stillness. They had taken photos, sent soil samples. Nothing ever came back. We were told not to pursue it. Said it was runoff damage. I always knew that was a lie. He handed Loranaga a folder. Inside was a single photo. A girl. Dark hair. Mid-step in what appeared to be a clearing. Eyes wide. A badge pinned to her chest. But her face, it wasn't looking at the camera. It was looking behind it, at whoever had taken the photo. And in her eyes, there was no recognition. Just terror. And something else. A strange glint. Reflection. Maybe. Or glass. Like a mirror behind whoever stood there, capturing something else entirely. Something that to this day, no one has been able to enhance clearly. Only the vague shape remains, just behind the girl's shoulder. Bent. Tall. Not quite aligned with the horizon. And not looking at her. Looking at us. The letter was buried at the bottom of a shipping crate misfiled in the Harrows Creek Historical Society archive. It was discovered during an unrelated tax document review in late March. A volunteer named Stacy Goff had opened it because the handwriting on the envelope didn't match the return address. Troop Leader Maria, Alden, 1962. The return address, curiously, was a Missouri-based religious seminary that had never operated in Arkansas. The letter inside was unmailed. It began, "To whomever finds this, I've broken the first oath. There will be consequences. I know that now. But the girls are not gone. Please understand that. We were told to bring them, and we did. But I didn't know the extent. I didn't know they would make them choose." The rest of the letter was fragmented. Water damage, perhaps, or deliberate smudging. But 3 phrases stood out, each circled in black pencil. The 4th bell. Eyes open, face down. Mirror drill incomplete. In a conference room 40 miles away, Agent Loranaga sat with psychologist Dr. Rachel Moan, reviewing what had come to be known as the mirror lesson tapes. The audio reels had no dates. No voices were audible aside from a woman, calm, firm, leading a group of children through exercises. Instructions. Chance. On tape 2, the voice says, "When you see yourself, but it doesn't see you, what do? Children, in unison. Face the wall. Do not look back. And if it sees you, silence." Then one child, barely audible. "Lie down and pretend to be the one who stayed." Dr. Moan had to pause the tape twice. "These aren't just drills," she said. "They're rituals. Conditioned responses. It's behavioral training, but with symbolic rules." "Symbolic of what?" Loranaga asked. Moan hesitated. "Symbolic, if we're lucky." Meanwhile, at the newly opened section of the underground bunker, a room once filled with rusted tin cots and hanging ropes, investigators found a strange recessed door in the concrete. Behind it, there was a staircase that led nowhere. 15 steps. Then, solid wall. The wall had scratch marks, and a single handprint in soot. Not a child's, but something larger, smeared downward, as though something had once tried to crawl out of that dead-end tunnel. The soot was tested. It wasn't from fire. It was mostly carbon and bone ash, mixed with what lab analysts believed was teeth dust. Elsewhere, Rima Dev continued work on the deteriorating negatives recovered from the riverbed tin case. After days of chemical prep and digital enhancement, one image finally came into clarity. It was a narrow corridor, lined with mirrors. In each reflection, a different girl could be seen walking, each one slightly different in position and posture, as though taken from separate moments. But only 9 girls were visible. In the 10th mirror, there was no girl, only a dark silhouette standing alone. And on the wall beside that final mirror, Someone had etched in graphite, "You are the reflection now." That night, Dev returned home to find a package had been left on her doorstep. No postmark, no address. Inside, a hand-carved troop badge, one she hadn't seen before. It bore no troop number, just a single eye etched in the center, and a note, written in pencil. Her name was May. She was left-handed. She liked daffodils and the smell of burned matches. Her favorite song was the one about the little light shining. Dev stared at it for a long time. On the back, the note simply read, "Don't forget them." In the weeks that followed, more parents came forward. People who'd lived in Harrow's Creek in the 60s but had never spoken out. Most had been told their daughters died in the storm. Some had received death certificates with incorrect birth dates or mismatched medical information. A few had been threatened. "I was told she'd fallen into the floodwaters," said one elderly woman. "They brought me a closed coffin. Said it was best not to open it. But now I think I know that wasn't her in there. I felt it." Her daughter's name? May Holloway. Back underground, workers trying to excavate the staircase dead-end struck something unexpected. Hollow space behind the concrete. It took 6 hours to break through. Inside, they found a chamber. Round, symmetrical, the walls lined with reflective steel. In the center was a podium, and on it, a child's journal. The first page read, "This is not the start. This is what's left of the middle. We didn't vanish. We were made to stay. There are rules here. Please, if you're reading this, tell them we didn't forget the sun." The journal's cover was blue canvas, frayed at the edges, still damp in places from years of condensation. Inside were 12 surviving pages. The handwriting changed halfway through. The first entries were meticulous, careful, written by a girl who appeared to be chronicling something instructed, perhaps even assigned. Day 1. We lined up. Maria told us to hold hands. If we walked without breaking the chain, we'd find the room with the good lights. But if we let go, we'd get the other lesson. Day 3. I heard someone crying in the mirror wall. But when I got close, it stopped. The reflection didn't. Day 6. No one remembers singing the light song, but it plays every morning. Now when we hum it, the doors unlock. The author never named herself, but toward the end of the first section, she referred to 2 girls by name, Bethany and Carla. Carla had passed the test, it said. Bethany was still echoing. Then the handwriting shifted. More rushed, less coherent. It's not day anything. We measure by when the light gets hot enough to burn the rope shadows off the wall. One girl left. Not sure how. Maria said she graduated, but she looked scared. She asked where outside was. Maria said it's still beneath you. Sometimes the mirror shows what we look like now. Sometimes it shows how we'd look if we'd gotten out. We keep stepping in the same footprints. We think they're ours, but sometimes they move. The final entry simply read, "The 4th bell is tomorrow. One of us won't ring." In a separate effort, a FOIA request yielded a memo dated November 9, 1962 from the Arkansas Department of Child Welfare, flagged under Sensitive Custody Logistics. It referenced Youth Relocation Initiative, HCR-KT 42, and noted, Bunkers 1 and 2 closed. Bunker 3 Mirror Orientation Program to remain dormant pending further evaluation. Troop leader Maria Alden reassigned to seminary education oversight under Religious Discretion Clause. When questioned decades later, the last living director of that department, Stanley Corton, claimed he had no memory of any such program. But investigators found a photograph in Corton's personal files. It showed 10 girls in uniform standing inside what looked like the edge of a cavern. The oddity wasn't the uniforms or the cavern wall. It was the 11th figure at the back, almost faded, whose uniform didn't match, whose face was turned away, wearing a ring with an eye insignia, the same as the badge Dev had received weeks earlier. Then, in early summer, a break. At an abandoned seminary property once owned by the religious group listed on Maria Alden's return address, workers clearing collapsed plaster found a locked chest inside a brick wall. It contained reels, more audio tapes. Only 2 were salvageable. One, labeled Echo Retention Session 14B, was nearly silent, except for one child's whisper, repeated dozens of times, hours apart. Tell them we stayed because the lights said our names. The other reel was different. No instructions, no drills, just the voice of a girl. Monotone, detached. It sounded like a confession, but the cadence was off, as if being read or repeated under direction. My name is Bethany Cross. We went in together. Carla stopped singing. The bell cracked. Maria said that meant we failed. We had to do it again, and again, and again. I don't remember where we started, but I remember what the mirrors did when we forgot to close our eyes. I remember what I looked like with no face, and then it wasn't me anymore. Agent Laranaga stood in the middle of the underground chamber, staring at the walls now stripped of debris, wires, and relics. The space was unsealed, cleared, and yet still wrong. He turned to Dr. Moan, who stood beside the mirror wall. "Why were they brought here?" he asked. Moan didn't answer immediately. She pointed to one corner, where a strange ring of soot still lingered in the cement. "Because something was here long before them," she said. "And they weren't just scouts. They were bait." Laranaga didn't ask for clarification. He just looked again at the handprint, the one too large, too smeared. Then back at the mirror. For a moment, he could have sworn he saw 10 children reflected, but only 9 people stood in the room. He looked again. 9. Still 9. But something had changed. His own reflection? It wasn't looking back. The recovered files stopped cold in 1964, 2 years after the disappearance. 1 year after the last confirmed sighting of Maria Alden. Then, nothing. No formal resignations. No memorials. No acknowledgement that a scout troop had ever existed in the region at all. It was as though the girls had simply been erased, not just physically, but administratively, systematically, by hands that knew where to press and when to vanish. But they hadn't disappeared entirely. The tapes, the journal, and the room itself, those things remained. So did the names. And the bell. In early fall of that same year, 1992, a boy hiking through the Ouachita foothills with his father came across a shallow stone staircase. It wasn't marked on any map. No trail led to it. Just rough pines and dry moss and one crooked row of steps descending into dirt. They found no structure at the base, only a circle of scorched ground and a rusted chain looped around a pole that had long since broken in half. The boy asked what it was. The father didn't answer. He just stared at something in the trees. Carved into the bark of a nearby pine were 5 names, the first 3 faint, almost lost to weather. The 4th and 5th were fresher. All of them female. All of them followed by the same scratched symbol. An eye. Crying. In the years that followed, Dr. Naomi Moan quietly resigned from her post, declining interviews. She withdrew from public work and moved to a remote property in South Dakota. A former colleague once said she had grown obsessed with light mapping. Agent Laranaga returned to D.C., but never filed a complete report. He said the case belonged to a different drawer now, but the town remembered. In 1995, an anonymous artist built a sculpture on the edge of the old campgrounds, just outside the abandoned hiking loop where the original team had last been seen. The installation was simple. 10 child-sized chairs, half buried in the ground, facing a mirror mounted to a dead tree. The tree was split through the center, hollow. No dedication was ever made. No name was left. But someone began leaving pine cones on the chairs. 1 every June. Always 10. In 2006, a local contractor rebuilding a basement in Morrilton found something wedged behind a collapsed water heater in a crawlspace. It was a mirror, circular, antique, its glass warped at the edges. Someone had scratched words into the back in a child's handwriting. "If you see your breath, it's not cold. It's listening." He donated it to a thrift store. The mirror was bought by a family in North Little Rock. 7 months later, The youngest daughter of that family, aged 10, disappeared from her bedroom without opening a door or window. Her last known drawing was found pinned to her closet wall. It showed a circle of girls holding hands inside a black room. Above them, written in block letters, "The bell's not done." Some things fade. Others echo. In the woods, when the wind is still, people say they've heard faint humming. Not a tune, just a rhythm, like the beat of something searching. At Camp Larkoven's ruins, where the scout team last stood, nothing grows anymore. But sometimes, after rain, shoe prints reappear in the mud. Tiny, too many to count, facing inward, toward a center no one can see.